The old saying goes, if you treat people like children, they'll behave like children. And that's exactly what one Australian senator believes. Liberal Democrat David Leyonhjelm says Australia has become a nanny state with too many rules about what's good for us. Today, he led a Senate inquiry into the issue. The inquiry has attracted 236 submissions and will cover a grab bag of issues, from bike helmet rules to laws on marijuana and tobacco to food advertising. At the centre of the inquiry is this question: to what extent is regulation hindering personal freedoms? During its first hearing in Canberra, the main theme was hedonism versus health, with one witness accusing wowsers of making people miserable. Jason Om prepared these highlights.
Paternalism is fundamentally undemocratic. Paternalism treats citizens like subordinates.
There are other costs associated with wowser activity in addition to making the lives of individuals more miserable, and there are costs to health even. Even the one thing that is supposed to be improved can also suffer, and you see this, for example, when you try and force people to wear cycle helmets or when you ban e-cigarettes.
Jane, if you've got an ashtray, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex, we don't have any.
I'm sorry, Alex, but this house is a no-smoking zone.
Oh.
I see these sin taxes, as you call them, as life-saving taxes. Why should we pay for the sins of others? So I'm thinking, because when these people smoke, they drink and ride bikes without helmets.
You are much more likely to be involved in an accident on bikes and skateboards than in a car.
This is kind of like the infantilising argument. So you treat people like children, they'll behave like children.
Yes.
So if you say to the people, if you stick to the speed limit and obey all the other rules, you will be safe. Is that what you're referring to?
That's a large component of it, absolutely.
All right, come on. Hey guys, you knock it off. You want it? You knock it off, all right? You idiot. Come on then. Check out.
Can I very quickly take you to the specifics of the alcopops and get your take on that as a tax?
What were we trying to achieve here? You know, was there a real issue with youth consumption of of mixed drinks?
So I'm revealing far too much about myself here, because my youth, and I'm going to pretend it was a long time ago, and it kind of was drinking alcopops at the cross at 2 a.m. So I'm probably a bit of vested interest here, Mr. Pryden.
Yeah. My drinking is killing me. My smoking is killing me. My head is killing me. My mind is killing me.
So what do you think is the most dangerous thing people do every day? Most people do every day.
Most people do every day. That's a good question. I think the answer to that is what we're doing now, Senator, sitting. They say that sitting is the new smoking.
Some of the things that we're paying for taxes that are saving lives, you're calling them like junk science and advocacy-based quackery.
It looks like just another car, but it's a booze bus.
Good evening, sir. How are you going? It's the police, sir. Have you consumed any alcohol today?
You're joking, aren't you?
No, sir, it's not a joke.
It's ridiculous.
One long continuous breath into there until I ask you to stop. Sir, in my opinion, the result of the test indicates your blood contains
Unmarked police cars are now giving random breath tests. You drink and drive. You're a bloody idiot.
I would argue the practical implications of regulation in this country have been incredibly effective. Is that something you wouldn't agree with?
I wouldn't agree with that, no.
You would remove all regulation if none of it's worked. Where do you draw the line? You don't seem to draw a line.
I don't draw the line.
They're quite revolutionary suggestions.
Oh, yeah. Revolutionary.
Oh, come on, comrade.
I tell you about them every day.
Comrade Lionel.
Put them all together, and what have you got? You've got McDonald's, good and hot.
I'm not at all convinced that advertising creates the demand for fatty or salty food or sugary food of which we know are part of a deep human desire.
For a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, the medicine go down, medicine go down.
Liberal Democrat Senator David Leyonhjelm instigated the Personal Choice and Community Impacts Inquiry, and he joins me now in the studio. And from Canberra, Michael Moore, Chief Executive Officer of the Public Health Association of Australia. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good evening, Emma.
So, David Leyonhjelm, let's go through some legislated areas of behaviour, and perhaps you can just give me a yes to regulation or no. Bike helmets.
No.
For kids?
It's a personal... that's parental choice. If the parents say yes, yes, but it's not a government thing.
Motorbike helmets. You rode here on a motorbike tonight. If you had your way, would you...
In Libertopia, in a pure libertarian world, we would have no compulsory motorbike helmets. I would wear one, nonetheless. I think it makes sense to wear one, but there's a difference between what the government says you have to do and what is good sense to do.
Seatbelts?
Same story. In some states of America, they have a very libertarian philosophy. They don't make them compulsory, even though everyone agrees they're a good idea. I don't intend to do anything about motorbike helmets or
Let's just do a
seatbelts.
yes or no for now, then we can go into some of the details. Yeah. Should smokers be able to smoke wherever they like?
No.
Drugs?
Which ones?
Cocaine?
That's a difficult thing because...
Ice?
Definitely not.
Marijuana?
Yes.
Child immunisations?
Yes. Well, no, child immunisation, I believe in the vaccination policy that if
that we have to vaccinate our children.
We should vaccinate, yes.
Guns?
Well, that's a different thing. It's not a nanny state issue. I believe in regulating access to guns, but I don't believe in regulating the type of gun.
Driving a car at a young age, or should we keep it at the age it is?
That's an adult versus child question, not a nanny state issue. So my view is when we think young people are responsible enough to make responsible decisions driving a car. So that's somewhere around 16, 17, 18.
But it should be legislated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A ban on tobacco advertising?
Oh, no, that's free speach. Advertising is speech.
Okay, just a yes or no for now. The sale of alcohol, should that be restricted to those over 18?
Should be restricted to some age because children, young people are too irresponsible to make adult choices.
Drink driving, should that be allowed?
No.
No speed limits on roads?
No, speed limits are okay, just that the current ones are set the wrong way.
In what way?
They're set by bureaucrats, they should be set by drivers, so that we all agree on what the safe speed ought to be for a particular road.
Bureaucrats are drivers too, presumably?
Yes, but they're self-appointed experts.
Michael Moore, we don't want to live in a nanny state, do we?
It's interesting that they use the term the nanny state. No, we want to get the appropriate balance between personal choice and good stewardship of government. So I think the whole idea of a nanny state is laughable. It was originally coined by a British columnist called Quoodle. Now, Quoodle is actually Ian MacLeod, a former British health minister who was renowned for smoking through a press conference on the dangers of tobacco in 1957. Interesting because he died when he was 57.
Of a tobacco-related illness?
Probably.
David Leyonhjelm, some of the evidence is compelling, in which case it becomes a balance, doesn't it, between, on the one hand, what we might find annoying in terms of government incursions in our lives versus what's going to keep us safe. And in the end, isn't it better to be safe than sorry?
Well, the question is how far do you go? How safe do you want to be?
Safe as possible, don't we?
Well, you wouldn't like it if you're as safe as possible. If we wanted to be as safe as possible, we would have speed limits of 10 k's an hour. We wouldn't allow any risky behaviour whatsoever because inevitably there's going to be some casualties at some level. So the question is where does the balance lie? The point that we're examining in our nanny state inquiry is when should the government intervene when adults are making a choice that only affects themselves, not other people. So adults wearing bicycle helmets is an excellent example. There's nobody who's going to get hurt if you fall off and smash your head. Nobody else is going to get hurt. So to what extent is it legitimate?
Well, your family's going to be hurt by that, surely.
So, okay, your family might be upset if you don't change your undies every day too. Should the government say...
That's not going to kill you though, is it?
No, but there are lots of other things that might kill you. So to what extent should the government save you from, or save your family from grief? That's the question.
Yeah, but of course, Emma, the reality is that somebody who has a brain injury, a young person, brain injury because they weren't wearing a bicycle helmet, their family looks after them for the rest of their life, the community looks after them for the rest of their life, and a brain damaged individual, of course, can be a very expensive part of the long-term care that the community wears, not to mention the personal grief of the family and the emotional upset for the whole community.
David Leyonhjelm, he's got a point, hasn't he? I mean, it ends up costing the community, the government, a lot of money if people are sick.
Yeah, so why don't we ban riding a bicycle? Why don't we ban
No, we just want to make it as safe as we possibly can so people can still enjoy it, don't we?
Well, yes, but you can enjoy it more if you don't have to wear a helmet.
Really?
Yes.
So is your concern really that they don't look so good?
No. My concern is that it's government intrusion gone too far.
No, you just said that you could enjoy it more if you weren't wearing the helmet.
Yes. A lot of people don't ride a bike for the reason that they have to wear a helmet. It diverts the police into, instead of stopping domestic violence or intervening in domestic violence, they book people for not riding without a helmet on their head. It diverts resources into things that don't matter. Are we drawing a line and saying, no, you're not allowed to go and damage your head under any circumstances? Or are we saying, under some circumstances, we accept you're taking a risk, you might damage your head, and what are those circumstances? My argument is riding a bike should be similar to skydiving, bungee jumping, riding a skateboard or rollerblades or something like that. You might hurt your head in all of those things. Should the law intrude on those ones? My answer is no.
Emma, I think, of course, these are fanciful. I mean, we heard David earlier say that he doesn't believe in seatbelts. You know, we now have a situation where our injury and death associated with motor car accidents are exactly the same sort of figures as we had in the 1930s. That's not per capita, that's not per vehicle, that's at the same level. And so the cost to the community, the cost in pain, injury and so forth has been reduced remarkably by sensible stewardship by government, and I think that's the reality here. When you come to bicycle helmets, there is a debate within the public health community as to whether or not, there's been a long-term debate as to whether or not people are discouraged from riding and therefore not getting fit enough, which of course is a significant problem in our community. But the evidence is now coming in, and that's actually what we've got to rely on, is actually what the evidence says. And the evidence is coming in is that it's not a particularly big disincentive.
So on guns, let's talk about guns. There were 13 mass shootings in Australia during the period of 1979 to 1996, but none in the decade 97 to 2007 after John Howard introduced the gun buyback scheme. Doesn't that indicate that gun control works in reducing crime?
Well, this isn't a nanny state issue, but just to answer that question, New Zealand didn't introduce the same gun laws that we introduced in Australia. At that time, they were asked to and they declined. They haven't had any mass shootings either. Canada has gone backward.
How many did they have in the preceding
I don't know, but
decades?
Several. Yeah, they've had some. In America, which everybody seems to want to compare Australia to, the states and the towns with the most strict gun laws, including some, such as Washington DC, who have gun laws very similar to Australia's, are also the ones which have the highest gun violence, and the states and areas with the lowest gun laws, the least control, have gun violence lower than Australia's. But this is not a nanny state issue. We are talking about the potential to cause harm to a third person. That's not a nanny state issue.
Well, what about let's talk about a nanny state issue then. Smoking, that's a nanny state issue?
Absolutely, yeah.
But doesn't smoking have the ability to cause ill health to other people around you?
Yes, secondary smoking, and I'm not denying that, and nor does anybody on my side of the argument deny that. What we do argue is that it's a personal choice when you're not affecting somebody else. And yet we have nanny state measures such as plain packaging, such as very, very high taxes that are intended to stop people from smoking, irrespective of whether they're harming somebody else.
But won't they harm the economy overall if they end up becoming sick and in fact, very sick, because we know that smoking causes a lot of harm and kills?
It does. It makes people die earlier. That actually saves the economy money.
Well, it costs insurance companies a lot of money, potentially.
Yes, but this cost has actually been estimated. The cost that smokers load onto the economy has actually been calculated relative to the amount of excise they pay on cigarettes, which is very high. It's 17 to 1. They pay 17 times what they cost the economy in excise. So they're
David,
paying their way well and truly.
David, you know these figures have been challenged many, many times, and the reality is that from a huge study, recent study released by Emily Banks and others at the Australian National University, shows that 2/3 of people who smoke will actually have somewhere in the order of a 10-year shorter lifespan. But it's not just the shorter lifespan that's been important. As I explained to your committee today, it's actually about healthiness. We actually measure how healthy people are in a system which we refer to as disability adjusted life years. So that's just a measure of how healthy we are as a community. Australia is in the top 2 or 3 in the world for both longevity and healthiness. And surely that's something that we ought to be proud of. And it's about good government stewardship instead of this stupid phrase you keep using of the nanny state.
Just a final comment from you each, because we're running out of time.
Well, look, we trust people to make decisions about who they vote for. We say to them, well, you're competent, you have enough knowledge, you have enough intelligence to choose who's going to govern the country. Pretty profound decision. No personal cost incurred either in that. And yet we say to people, no, we don't trust you to make a decision about whether to ride a bicycle with a helmet or whether to smoke when you're not hurting anybody else, and those sorts of things, even though the cost is incurred by them personally. I think it's authoritarian. It's not freedom, it's authoritarian, and we've gone too far.
Michael, a final view from you?
Absolute nonsense, of course. I think David's quite confused. At one minute he says, yes, we should have it on this, we shouldn't have it on that. The reality is, and I suppose this is almost where we agree, is that there's a balance between personal responsibility and good government stewardship as outlined by the Nuffield Ethics Committee. So it's that good government stewardship that we want to ensure that we have an appropriate level of freedom as individuals, as we should have, and an appropriate level of government stewardship.
Michael Moore, David Leyonhjelm, we're out of time. Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Emma.
And that's all from us for tonight and for this week. You can find all of Lateline's stories and interviews on our website at abc.net.au/Lateline. Good night, have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.